Greetings! I am Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome! It's Saturday! And that means I'm going to start talking about other role-playing games. And what I want to do is I'm going to start with 4 games of my choice, and I'm going to speak to you about them on Saturday. I'm going to go 2 a day, and then alternate every week, talking a little bit about them. I'm going to go similar to what I'm doing with my other games, but I think I won't go as in-depth. I'll tell you about the world setting, how to play the game, how to make characters, but I'm eventually going to break away from that, and I'm not going to go into such in-depths on the rules. So today's game that I'm going to talk about is Shadowrun. Now I have the book here. Again, my books get beat up a lot, so don't mind that. Shadowrun is one of my favorite gaming systems of all time. As a game master, it's really difficult to run if you're not running the pre-made adventures. That's my first warning about it. Now, I'm going to be talking about the 4th edition of Shadowrun. There have been 5. So there's a 5th edition out. I haven't really tried the 5th edition yet. It's been out a while now, but unfortunately I just haven't had a chance to get a lot of the material on it. But I did get the conversion material, and it's really easy to convert between the two. So if you're interested in actually trying 5th edition out instead, I can tell you that it's not difficult to convert between the two of them, just from the information I'm giving. And the information I'm giving is going to give you a good idea of what to do in 5th edition. So, what is Shadowrun? Shadowrun is a sci-fi fantasy role-playing game. That's a good way of describing it. It's set on Earth in the future, but magic has returned to Earth. That's the big plot. Magic's come back, there are unusual races. I'll kind of go over everything about how this happened. I'll go over a little bit of the history today. But what I wanted to go is through some basic concepts of it, some basic information. So, how do I play Shadowrun? It's a D6 system. I mean, we're only using 6-sided dice. A lot of your numbers will represent the number of 6-sided dice you will roll. You get a success if you roll a 5 or a 6. That's as simple as that. So, if I have 6 dice to roll, I'm rolling them all. Chances are I'm going to get 2 successes with 6 dice. Because I should get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 5 and 6 are successes. Alright, so that's the basics of the system. You're going to be adding skills and attributes together to figure out how many dice you're rolling them all, coming up with numbers, comparing them, all the sort of things you would do normally. It's just that the difficulty tends to be a number of successes. That's the real kicker there. It's the number of successes that you need is a difficulty you're meeting, rather than a number, let's say with a D20 system. So what are you in this game? You play a runner. Runners are characters in the game that you can't call it post-apocalyptic, because there was no apocalypse in Shadowrun. But it's a future where there's a lot of crime and grit and dirt to it. And runners are the people that kind of skirt that line between lawful and unlawful. They're hired by governments and corporations and individuals to do jobs. And those jobs usually are pretty illegal. So it's sort of like, I'm a government and I want something done and it's shady, I hire a runner. Now, there are some basic archetypes of runners, because Shadowrun uses archetypes, not classes. I've talked about archetypes before. There's the face. The face is your person that's built to be charismatic, who's supposed to negotiate for you, who's speaking out front, who, let's say you need to get a cool gun, he's negotiating to get that cool gun, he's going to be the guy out in front. Then you have magicians. Magic came back. This is an alternate timeline to our world where magic comes back. So of course you have to have some kind of magic caster. And I'll go over how Shadowrun's magic works. It's a little complex, but if you sort of make a little cheat sheet for yourself, it's actually not difficult at all. It's just, there's like 5 steps you have to remember, And they're not really difficult steps, it's just remembering all the steps. I'll go over it. And then there's adepts. Adepts use magic like a magician, but instead of like casting spells, they enchannel it into their body. So like they're ninjas or martial artists who have like super abilities that are like doing flips in the air. That's an adept. Then we have a hacker. There's still a version of the internet in existence in Shadowrun. They call it the Matrix. It's not like the movie The Matrix. It's like a shadow internet that exists over everything where you can dive into it to go virtual reality. Similar to some animes and stuff, like some of you may have seen Sword Art Online, where they're going in full VR. That's what the thing is. You're going in full virtual reality to the Matrix, or you're just dipping your toe into it. They have ways that you can sort of see augmented reality. I'm sure some of you have heard of that, where they display stuff over reality, like there might be signs which are normally hidden that you can just see all of a sudden because you have altered reality in like some pair of glasses or headset or something. That's what the Matrix is. It's a combination of VR and altered reality, and it's sort of like internet to the thousandth. Hackers hack into stuff with the internet. They do what you think a hacker is. It's as simple as the title. Look, riggers. Riggers remote control vehicles and drones to their need. So like, if I'm a drone rigger, I might have something from like a combat drone, which is man-sized, to like little tiny micro drones, which I can use to spy on people. Or if I'm a vehicle rigger, I could basically merge with my car so that I'm one with my car and driving it that way. And the last archetype that's for the basic ones is street samurai. They use a lot of cybernetic enhancements and genetic enhancements and biological enhancements, and they're tough people with big guns and big swords, and they're the bruisers, the fighter types. So everything takes place in the year 2070. That's the time frame for Shadowrun. So it's deep in the future. And of course I said magic returns, and then there's the Matrix. The Matrix I've already talked about a little bit. With magic, there's also the astral plane, which is like this shadow plane of magic, which exists everywhere, that magicians get in contact with. So there's actually 3 levels of reality in the game you can play in. And you can play on them all at the same time. It's like, as I'm the street samurai, I'm fighting my way through a bunch of guards. Maybe the magician is in the astral plane fighting a guardian spirit, while the hacker is trying to take down the security drones before they get there. It can be all like that at the same time, and it's really cool that they can do that. And they built the system very well for meshing these together. Alright, so let's talk about what a runner does. I've said a little bit of it, but they have certain jobs they take. And talking about the jobs gives you an idea of what your character will be like. So there's of course B&E, breaking and entering. You might be hired to break into a place and get something from there. Or to break into a place for whatever reason, to make them think their security's bad. You know, it's for various reasons. Maybe they want you to steal a bunch of stuff so that the company loses a lot of money, the rival company. There's also courier jobs where you're paid to deliver something from here to there. That could still be illegal. You could be delivering anything. Then there's data steals, which is a big thing for hackers, that you're going into a place and you're stealing data from it. Because maybe that corporation or that building, they don't have outside matrix influence, so you've got to break into there. Extraction. Now, I'm going to need to give a little backstory. Shadowrun is the world of governments and megacorps. Megacorps, a good way to define that, is a corporation which is a country unto itself. There's a number of them that sort of make a council of corporations, and they range from AA to single A, or AAA to single A. And that's the sort of like hierarchy of corporations in Shadowrun. So governments are still there. Governments aren't like complete pushovers, but corporations have so much influence in this alternate world that they're countries unto themselves. So they oftentimes do these sort of things in between each other. And extraction means I want personnel from that corporation coming back to mine. Alright, next up is hooding. That's sort of like someone might pay you to rob from the rich to give to the poor sort of thing. Or you might be like contracted to do that if you take a little bit off the top. There are various ways you get into it. Or you could just do it because you like doing it. A runner does that sort of thing. That could be your charity work almost. There's smuggling. It's as it is. You're smuggling something across a border. The world has changed a lot. There's a lot of different countries. Areas of corporations can be a different border. There's also so many fractures in the country across the world that there's a lot of borders to smuggle things across. Then there's structure hits, where you're being hired to either destroy or damage a building. For whatever reason, they're saying you get that building in bad shape. And the final one, which a lot of runners don't actually take, but it can be your option if you want to be a character that would take it, Wetworks. Assassinations. That's someone hiring you to kill someone else. A lot of runners don't like that, but there are some that take it. So now, the final thing I want to talk about Shadowrun today is some history of the world. Now, it's an alternate world. In the late 90s, in this world, the corporations gained more autonomy than even we have given them today. They basically became countries unto themselves. And that was only the first step. This is the beginning of corporations building their power. Now, the next big thing was the awakening, when magic came back. Native Americans had actually been persecuted in this alternate timeline, and they were the first to reawaken magic because there had been some economic troubles, and they were put to blame because it was to do with, like, oil rights and things like that, that their territories were being, could have been exploited for resources that were needed. And, there was this entire smear campaign, and people turned against them, and things got really bad for Native Americans again, and then magic came back, and they were the first ones to harness it, and things went to crap. That's why there's a huge swath of countries that are Native American nations in the middle of the U.S. The U.S. has been fractured horribly. To give a little background of what this has caused, the United States map is completely different, and there's just chaos there. The Confederate actually broke away. United States annexed what's left of Canada after the Native Americans took it over. Mexico became its own country, grabbing a whole bunch of Central America. Things like this occurred. So this was chaos. And during this time, babies were beginning to be born, which were called elves and dwarfs. And it was very frequent. It wasn't like the, midget dwarfs. They were actually physically different than normal humans. Same with elves. Granted, they were still genetically human. It was just there was slight variations in it. That it was sort of like, think of the breeds of dogs. That's a good comparison between it. That's the sort of thing. Just to note on it, all the races of Shadowrun, when you get together, you're either one or the other for your children. There's no, half-breeds. There are other races, too, but I'll get into that sort of later, maybe. But for now, going back to the history, elves and dwarfs were beginning to be born. It was just different and interesting. And this was still causing panic. There was disease, there were natural disasters, and then all of a sudden, of all this chaos, the dragon Dunkelzan showed up and had an interview where he explained that magic was coming back to the world. That's why there's this supernatural stuff, and the elves and the dwarfs. He made some peace with it, because there had been sightings of dragons and all these crazy things going on across the world that people couldn't explain. So anyway, the next big thing that happened was goblinization. That's when about a fifth of the world's population all of a sudden changed and became orcs or trolls. And that's gotta be crazy. All of a sudden you're just standing there and boom, you're something else. And so I've now described all the races that show up in Shadowrun. and I'll go over them when I'm talking about character creation, but now they've all shown up. So things kept going. The early Matrix was developed. There was the crash of 29, in which the early Matrix was basically destroyed. More setbacks, more crumbling, and decades of rebuilding. There was a new Matrix. All the editions of Shadowrun take place in different time periods, and so they'll say like the year they're taking place in. This one was 2070, so it's like the history keeps changing, and if you look at each edition, they have like the early history, but then they go to a certain point. They keep adding on. And, you know, if you want more details, I'd go back and look at the older editions. If you're learning about that world history, it will, you know, expand, same size section, but they're dropping down for new stuff, you know, the older stuff. Eventually, Dunkelzine was elected president in 2057. This was unusual, because at this point in time, he was not only like the first non-metahuman, as all the races were called, he was just a dragon, and he was elected president. Explaining something, they came up with a system of putting citizens, because the other races were almost looked upon a little lesser, that there was sins. There were identification numbers that everyone got. If you were born with it, you were a citizen, you could vote, you know. Most metahumans could get them in certain countries, you know, like America was pretty open, but like really unusual intelligent races, that's rarer. You know, that doesn't happen a lot, because there's, other than the basic human races, there are other races that have appeared in the world. And this one was a dragon that was elected president. The thing is, he could also take human form. So that's why it was, he was able to like shift into a person and be like, oh, okay, I can get along with you and don't have to like have a huge room to be in. He was assassinated. Right away, almost. The bomb was like a magic bomb, and it left this scar in the middle of Washington that's still there in 2070. And strange things happen there. But he had this will that left all this crazy stuff to everyone. It had this information on an orc language, on an elven language, all these things. So that told us that these races had been here before. And he also told us that magic waned and waxed, and when magic was coming back to the world. We had just gone through a low point of magic, and now it was returning. And that's why these races were back. So there was this history that had been lost because magic disappeared. Anyway, time goes on. Halley's Comet returns, and that year is just crazy. There's natural disasters, there's terrorist organizations, there's another crash of the Matrix. There's all these things that just terrible things happen the year of the comet, and continue to rebuild, and coming into the modern time of 2070, that modern time, Matrix has been rebuilt. It's now a wireless network, because Shadowrun has also reflected our technological changes. The original Matrix was very much plug in, you do stuff. Now with our wireless world, it's a wireless network where you can have complete computers in your head, which are cell phones, TVs, pagers, text messaging, you know, everything your computer can do, it's in your brain, and you can access it, you know, through maybe like something controlled on your eyes, or just do it virtually, and you can see it either through your eyes if you've got cybernetics, or like lenses if you put them over. It's crazy. But that's it. That's the world of Shadowrun. And that's a little bit of the history of it. And there are so many more details I'm going to go over with you. Probably next time I'll go over a little bit more of the world and the current world as it is, and maybe start getting into character creation, and it'll be fun. And I'm hoping you'll enjoy learning about Shadowrun. Again, it's one of my favorite games to play, and favorite systems, and I've tried so many times to directly run a game, and I learned, use the adventures they provide. You still have to come up with things on your own, but they give you enough of the basics. It's not so much hard work. Anyway, so if you like this video, please leave a comment, leave a like. We always could use more citizens, so please subscribe to the channel. And until next time, I bid you farewell.